These words echoed through our minds in the lead up to what feels like the most important conversation of our lives. Coming out to family is never easy. As they say, it takes a village. To his mom, I was always the close friend, the housemate. Yet this housemate was always part of family road trips and holidays, and even planned several of those vacations. It was a grey zone of second guesses. We think she probably knows, but does she really know what we think she knows? By this point, we had spent 5 years living in silo, crafting a version of a world we want to live in. When we knew we had to evacuate from Hong Kong from the pandemic, without a job meant moving back to the family home with his mom. It also meant that we had to come clean about our relationship. I remember we were nervous, but we came up with a plan. It's what they call the sandwich strategy. Break the news that we were coming back to Singapore, moving back to be reunited to the family home, sandwiched with the truth of our relationship, that in fact we were also already married. What's the worst that can happen? Inherently, as children, we don't want to disappoint our parents, yet we can't be certain what the outcome is going to be. He got on a call separately with Mom while I was at work. His mom was momentarily silent for a few seconds on the video call when the news was delivered. She said she's always known, intently, almost like she had prepared herself for this day. Every pause in the conversation felt like an eternity. But we will never forget what she said next. Lately, the family is going through a season of transitions. Milestones, new chapters in life, each of us finding our own space. New parents to a newborn, a new home to raise a young child, and with it, leaving the family home as an empty nest. We moved out of the family home into a rental with hopes that our next home is the one that we own. That journey in buying a home in Singapore has honestly been a storied experience. First, let's set up the scene and a little bit of context around buying a property in Singapore. It is well known that most Singaporeans own the home they live in, with an incredible 80% living in public housing, and that is because of a very strong central housing policy. While public housing policy in most countries is rental-based, in Singapore the approach is quite the opposite. HDB stands for Housing Development Board, a government agency set up in the 1960s that plans, builds, and manages subsidized flats and housing estates. What makes this a unique approach to social housing is ownership, and that these HDB flats can be resold on the secondary market. Because of the brilliant way the government maintains and builds self-contained infrastructure, amenities, and public transport surrounding these HDB estates, public housing retains long-term value and can grow significantly, with some selling close to 2 million Singapore dollars in recent landmark sales. putting it almost at the same value as private property apartments. When HDB built new estates, it's commonly referred to as BTO, built to order. Every eligible citizen can apply for these at the development phase, and the cost of entry is actually relatively low, and that's because of this mixed acronym. Central Provident Fund, CPF, is Singapore's national social security savings system, a government-managed central savings account. Money that you can use for down payments and mortgage installments. Over time, CPF savings add up after a number of years working in a job before there's enough to put that towards the down payment of a HDB flat. In fact, it doesn't take very long to be able to afford that down payment for a BTO, as the government provides a bunch of housing grants to first-time home buyers that effectively pays for the bulk of the down payment. So it seems we should be able to afford our first home quite easily, right? Here's the plot twist. You see, when his dad passed away many years ago, my husband became the de facto man of the house and added his name to the mortgage to pay off the family home using his CPF. Many years on, with the mortgage paid off, it adds layers of complications to our home buying journey. In Singapore, you cannot own multiple HDB flats. You can only own one at any given time. The only option for us is to buy a private property. Which brings us to another fun acronym. Owning a private property while still holding on to a HDB flat, there is an additional 12% tax known as the ABSD, Additional Buyer's Stamp Duty. Now that the family home is becoming an empty nest, Mum considered selling the house to move to a smaller flat. Effectively, that would free up the co-ownership situation, providing us a way forward to buy a more affordable home in Singapore. It took several months of deliberation, and the reality of parting with the family home that held deep significance and memories took on an emotional toll. Eventually, she decided to keep the family home, to hold on to the last piece of connection with the memories of her late husband. So here's where things stand. Singaporean married couples have access to buy a HDB flat, whether it's a resale or a BTO. For people like us, we have no access to buy a HDB together because the Constitution doesn't recognize us as married. So even if we manage to solve the co-ownership conundrum with his mom, we cannot buy or own a HDB flat together, which sets up another problem down the road. Because if anything happens to one of us, it renders effectively the other homeless because only one of us owns the deed to the house. Which brings us to our final option that we mentioned earlier, buying a private property, which fortunately does not have marriage ownership rules around it. But Singapore private properties are typically above $1 million to start with, and add to that the additional 12% ABSD tax that we'll need to pay upfront in cash. It doesn't take much to work out that this effectively prices us out of the market. It's clear that the housing system in Singapore, wonderful and world-renowned as it is, unfortunately puts us at a huge disadvantage. Housing is a social right here, but only if you fall into a certain definition of existence. Housing is a social right, but for people like us, uninvited. It's honestly been an exhausting experience putting this episode together as it happens. It feels really hopeless with every turn hitting roadblocks and dead ends. On the surface, we're living a wonderful life, gorgeous, loving family. We have food on our table. We're not exactly poor, and life looks great on the outside. Yet I'm hyper aware that we're living on borrowed time. And perhaps it means looking to different pastures, somewhere friendlier, somewhere we can truly stand a chance to put down roots, where we are truly seen, which is another set of challenges that we will need to address head on. As I said in the beginning, this is a developing story in finding forever. The road ahead looks uncertain. We've been knocked down in life and we're familiar with these challenges. We've been here before, yet somehow I still have faith that we will get through this. Thank you for watching this episode. Great to have you here following our journey. If you are new here, episode 1 will give you a bit of our history, how we met, our love story. If you're living in Singapore or you've recently gone on a journey to finding your forever home, what was your experience like? Let us know in the comments below. We would love to connect with you. And maybe that could give us some ideas on how we can navigate our journey. If this story resonated with you, please share it with people you think would benefit from it. As always, please consider subscribing if you haven't already and giving this video a thumbs up. And we'll see you in the next one.